Man, we're live. We're recording. What's going on,
Yeah,
Pierre?
man. Well, in yourself, man. It's been a minute that since we've had our last video recording. So yeah, it's I think it's quite exciting times for us. I think so.
Definitely. I think with the World Cup, though, too, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, I've got to find the time to kind of sit aside. And luckily, we're not playing today, the early game, and we can kind of get into our subject of the week. But of course, obviously, being both of our channels are big rugby channels, figured we'll take a few minutes to kind of discuss through, I guess, a round and a half of this Rugby World Cup, some of our thoughts, some of our overall feelings about the tournament so far. We'll take about 10 minutes. I've set the timer. Do you want to fire off first? Do you want me to fire off first?
Go for it, man. You seem all amped up.
So I guess so far through a week and a half of competition, the disappointments that we've seen a bit from the supposed favorites of the side. I'll try not to dig into that too much, but let's talk about like Uruguay, France. Like, who would have picked that to be that close? And kind of just the general vibe that we've put around some of these tier 2 teams. Obviously, we saw two of them go at it this morning with Samoa and Chile. We saw, unfortunately, Namibia take a thrashing at the hands of the All Blacks. Unfortunate injury to Milan Leroux there. If anybody saw the pictures on the internet, it's pretty nasty. His ankle was bent away. It shouldn't have been bent.
He looks like he's the backwards man, bro. He can walk forwards and backwards at the same time.
Pretty much at this point, and just kind of like the overall. It seems that you get these tier 1 nations beating up on these tier 2 nations, and then for some reason they want to like get up on their high horse about it. And it to me, that's a bit disappointing. Just because, you know, like even us as like Springbok guys, like we don't have the same money that England has. We don't have the same money that France has. And it's like, I don't know. I feel a little bit more a kinship to those tier 2 nations, even though I'm on a fan of a team that's won 3 World Cups. We're not really any different than the All Blacks as far as that goes. But I always feel like a bit more kinship. And I guess maybe because of the tier 1 nations, you'd probably argue that South Africa or Argentina are probably the poorest of those. Yeah, so you always kind of want to root for the little guy a little bit just because of that. I don't know. It's easier to be a fan of the underdog when you're a Springbok fan because you're pretty much always the underdog, it seems.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's why the Springboks actually do quite enjoy going into this type of situations, being the underdog, because they thrive in that type of situation. So, but speaking of the Uruguays of the world and those type of tier 2 nations that you brought up earlier, I was pretty surprised the way they were playing. Look, I mean, I'm not sure. I think it's really a little bit of both, that they were playing a little bit better than everybody anticipated, but also I think that France played a bit worse than I anticipated in that game. There was a lot of handling errors, and in scrums, like it was mental. Like I couldn't believe that the guys are on the try line and they lose the ball, and I'm like, what is going on this game? And at the end of the day, I do feel like one can really root for these type of teams, because everybody expects the tier 1 nation to win, and so you sort of feel like that feeling inside yourself. You just want to see these smaller guys succeed for once. And I think it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, that the South African people are really like that as well, that we're always facing adversity and some type of an issue, or may it be government related, may it be power related, may it be crime related. There's always something, and I think because of that fact, I think we've got a bit of pride in ourselves that we persevere through that type of situation. So I guess you feel a little bit stronger for the little guy playing into that. So, and I mean, as you mentioned with the monetary values, in 2021, if I recall correctly, it was 2021, that we played the British and Irish Lions. And I mean, if you watch Chasing the Sun, you'll know that that was times back in the day when, if it didn't happen, or not Chasing the Sun, sorry, it's Two Sides, I think is this show called. If the British and Irish Lions didn't happen, the Springboks would have been done. It would have been finished. There would be no games ever. And I mean, that's coming from one of the most successful World Cup nations in the history of rugby. That they were going to just cease to exist because of monetary issues, and so I can really see why you have that feeling of wanting to put some form of um, uh, belief in the smaller guy, because really that's what we are from a financial point of view, I guess one would call it. Maybe not as a sporting nation, but more of a financial point of view. Certainly less affluent than our brethren, other brethren in these tier one nations. So yeah.
I think, yeah, it does kind of go back. I think, like I said, yeah, we definitely, I don't live in South Africa. I live in America, but I've spent time there, and I've seen not even everything, but I've seen a lot of strife. And you bring it up a lot that there is a lot of pride in the people there, and perseverance and that kind of thing. I mean, even stronger together being the motto. But then it's like you kind of look, every time you see kind of maybe like an equal, like the table is leveling out, like you see with Fiji right now. Like you think that, okay, maybe the tide is really turning, but really for me, I feel like the gap is actually getting bigger between the tier one and tier two nations. And I say this as a guy that lives in America whose team didn't even qualify to make the World Cup. And I mean, like, we had a pretty stacked roster. We had a lot of guys playing in the Premiership in France, and we couldn't even beat Chile. We couldn't beat Portugal. And I feel like the gap is growing bigger. Unfortunately, like Namibia is this. They've never won a World Cup game. Namibia has never won a World Cup game, and they've qualified for all of them pretty much. I think all but one, I think.
Yeah.
And they've never won a single game in the World Cup. And it just feels like I said, the gap is getting a bit larger between we talk about underdogs, and I always talk about the 2007 World Cup. Like Tonga had us on our butts by half. Like, we had to call in the bomb squad of that time to save us, and it's like you just don't see that nearly as much. Like Uruguay and France was an example of like, like maybe the gap isn't as bad, but for every Uruguay France, there's a Namibia, New Zealand, there's a Romania, Ireland. It's not, you don't really feel. I feel like the gap is getting larger, not closer. I think World Rugby is trying to change that by their eligibility rules, but like, the starting fly half for Samoa today played for the Wallabies, and he's like damn near 40. I think Christian's like 37, 38 years old. Is that really going to help you beat an England? Probably not, and then, it doesn't help when you have countries in that part of the world that peel players from those countries, New Zealand, Australia, Japan. But in the same respects, it's like, that's, I feel like World Rugby doesn't want 20 tier one teams. They want it to be an exclusive club. Right now, there's 13 there's 12 tier one nations. There's six nations, and then Argentina, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. So there are 11 tier one nations right now. I think the talk was that if the USA could do well, they would be the next one to join tier one status. And I mean, like, to me, it's like, do they deserve it? Oh, no, they're going to get tier one status because of how much money they have. Like,
but the sad truth is it's a much bigger problem, I think. So the first problem is, a lot of these players go where the money is, and one can't really blame them for that. They got families to support, they got all these things that they have to pay, and I mean, if you just consider the medical bills that these guys go through because of injuries and surgeries that they need to go through and all those type of things. So I can't blame them. But then you think of countries like, for instance, South Africa, that uses purely South African people. Countries like Chile, maybe as well, if I'm not mistaken, they're also only using Chilean people. There's a lot of these countries that do it with a pride factor of not buying people from overseas. Sure, we had Tendai Twarira that was from Zimbabwe, if I recall, but I mean, that guy spent so much time in South Africa. He's basically a South African anyway. So
yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's other than that, it's really a South African team. Like, it's born and bred. It's a proud factor when you can take your own people onto a global stage and really be competitive. Where when you face some of these other guys, they're like all bought people from all over the globe. Some of these teams look more Samoan than anything else, but they might be like, let's say, a Japanese team or whatever other country, because these guys have got so much money. They buy all these players in, and really, are you really then facing that nation? That's the question I sort of want to pose to you. Sure, they might have gone through some of the phases, maybe on school level in that country. Or I'm not saying that it's wrong. I tend to wonder, can you really be proud as a nation if all you did was throw so much money behind it into the team? It's I'm open to scrutiny. You can say what you want to say, guys. It's like, all I'm saying is I just asked the question, is it there?
No, all great. That will kind of segue into the topic of the week. And I guess it's going to be more kind of an American-centered kind of conversation. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between differences. And this came up. So I am a massive supporter of Oklahoma State University's football program, having been there and everything. And it's they have an in-state rivalry with the University of Oklahoma every year. The game is called Bedlam. It goes back 100 years. It's been a very lopsided competition. It's kind of like the Bledisloe between the Kiwis and the Wallabies. It's been very one-sided throughout the history. But after this year, the University of Oklahoma joins a different conference, so they will not have Bedlam for a while. And I was looking at going to a college gridiron football game. Now, for those of you outside of America, we have started paying our collegiate athletes a little bit of money. A couple of them, obviously, the bigger names get the bigger payouts. But for the most part, like 75, 80 to 90% of these rosters, these guys are not getting paid a dime. It's amateur. It's amateur players. These are guys not getting contracts. They are getting their schooling paid for, their education, et cetera, their living, that kind of thing, but they're not under contracts like professional players. And you go to look at tickets for this game, and the lowest price ticket that I'm able to find is $330 something a piece for one ticket. So you do the math with fees, you're looking at like close to $800 for two tickets to an amateur sporting event.
I just have a question on that. Sorry to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
What happens to these kids? If they get like let's say a career-ending injury, and let's say they first or second year, and let's say that university degree takes them 3 or 5 years or however long their scholarship is for. I just want to understand: do these guys fulfill their commitment to that student?
So typically what happens if you do get injured, depending on what time of the season it is, you can get what's called like a red shirt deferment, which gives you an extra year of playing time and eligibility to play for the program. their medical care is taken care of by the university, by the sports program, that kind of thing. But as far as like, can you lose your scholarship for like, say, blowing out your knee? I'm pretty sure you can. Um, I'm sure that there's ways that they'll keep you through to get you through academically, because it also does look good on the program as well if you do finish school. Because the likelihood of you going to play professional American football after college is extremely low. The typical career in the NFL is 1.5 years. You're in the league a year and a half, and that's it.
Sure.
And I mean, yeah, it is. We are building, these schools are making massive amounts of coin on the backs of, don't mean to be stereotypical, but a lot of these kids do not come from anything. A lot of them are lower class, poor inner city kids. That sports is the only way that they have any opportunity to go to college, because they don't have the money to pay for it. Yeah. And it is kind of a double-edged sword. Like, I do see, cost of university in this country is outrageous. It can cost you up to $50,000 a year to go to college in this country. And you say, where does all that money go? Well, when you've got to build 60, 70, 80,000 seat stadiums to play football games in, that's where a lot of it probably goes. Now, that is a revenue producer as well as a revenue spending type thing, but I do find it just a bit. We have a problem in this country with amateur sports, and it's that there's always somebody trying to make money off of athletes not getting paid. And it even goes past college football. I mean, we've discussed Major League Rugby salaries with each other before. The highest paid Major League Rugby player might make $500-600 US a week, which might seem like a lot overseas. That's not even a living wage in this country. You're living below the poverty line playing professional rugby in America. And
that might sound like a lot of money to a guy that doesn't have any money, but for a professional sports person in South Africa, that's no money, to be honest. I mean, if you have a look at guys like Cheslin Colby and these type of guys, they make millions, and sure, they're playing abroad, but I mean, they make millions. So it's actually sad that these guys are being born and bred to play this beautiful sport that we call rugby in Major League Rugby, and they're getting paid $500 or $600, and what they put their bodies through. They like, this is one thing, right? Like, I watched that Untold. I told you yesterday, I watched Untold, that whole story of the Gators, and that college football team as well.
Yeah.
And you just see how these people put their bodies on the line. They like in the gym at like 12 o'clock at night when everybody's out there partying and stuff like this. And I start to question, for whose benefit, really, because they put they like that guy. I promise you, when he's 40 years old, he's gonna walk like I don't know, like a person who was in one massive accident, because his bones are aching and his knees are aching, and he had so many concussions over so many years that he starts forgetting things, and so it's you start to question for what purpose. Yes, you want the college degree, but really, there's something broken in the system, in my opinion. Like. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents worth on that specific topic.
I still think, I guess, like I said, you hit the nail on the head. Like, we're having these people go out and risk not only just their body that day, but like 30 years from now, they may not ever walk again for $500 a week. Like, now, do I think athletes get overpaid? I can say that there's a fair bit that really, really do get overpaid. I mean, I live in America where we pay a guy $80 million to put a plastic bubble on his head and be covered from shoulder to feet in padding to maybe get bumped into. Like, I get it at the same response. Like, look, rugby is dangerous, football, every sport is dangerous at some level.
Mm.
I mean, you could even get seriously messed up playing cricket. I mean, you get hit, you can get in some serious pain.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you look at those sports where they don't necessarily pay the athletes a great amount of money, and it's like, who's benefiting off of that? And then you realize who's benefiting off of that. It's usually owners of teams, it's managers, it's these kind of guys. And I feel like we're paying all this money to go see guys that, you know, probably hanging on by a thread, especially when it comes to college football, of making it to the NFL. And if they make it to the NFL, then they're on a whole nother thing. I mean, yeah, granted, minimum pay in the National Football League is $800,000 a year.
Yeah.
Rugby contracts in America aren't even full year contracts. You're under contract for 6 months. That's it. The other 6 months of the year, you've got to figure out how to make money. And
the sad thing about that is that you actually have much more of a future in rugby, right? Like the average years that you can get from, let's say, a forward and a back. Obviously, the forwards are a little bit less than the backs. Oh no, sorry, it's the other way around. The forwards are a bit longer than the backs, right? So you can play well into your 30s as a forward. The backs, there's very few of them, but there are some of them that's gone on to play professional rugby until they're like 38, 39 years old.
Yeah.
But generally, the backs don't last over 33, 34, but still, they started when they were 19 years old.
Yeah.
So, it's quite a long career for us from a sport perspective, and that's something that I actually noticed watching a lot of reactions of American people to rugby, right? So that is the first thing they could usually say. Oh my God, I can't believe how these guys are playing. They must not have a very long career. And I'm like, actually, they kind of do. They actually do. Sure, these guys get injured and sometimes they're out for 9 months, but then they're back on the saddle. Like, let's say, hypothetically, somebody like Sia Khaleesi or somebody like Ebenezabeth, or, those type of guys. They get injured, they go into recovery mode, and then after that, they're back on the saddle, and, it's game on. And I mean, people like your Sia Khaleesi, you can't even say that guy was out for, with an ACL tear, but I mean, I'm not trying to talk them up as players. What I'm trying to get to is that, it's quite unnerving that you say that the average lifespan of, like, let's say, a professional football player is 1.5 years. That's just like,
that's their time that they get at the National Football League at the top level. Because the competition is so fierce, because every year you have a draft and you have all these picks coming in, you have you're going to get replaced if you're not that good. And I mean, the thing about rugby that, like, I do love about the sport as well is that, like, hey, look, if you're not, you look at the Springboks, for instance, okay? A guy like Cheslin Colby, would I love to see him play for a URC team in South Africa? Of course I would. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want to see that? But the reality is his skill sets and his skill level can get him more money elsewhere. Now, does that make me look down on him for that? No, of course not. Like, go get your money, Bubba. Like, do your thing. There was a quote from Dion Fody who was like, I spent 6 years here in France, not ever thinking I was going to come back playing for a World Cup. Like, and I don't have, like, I don't feel like somebody like Malcolm Marks or Quagga Smith, I don't feel like they're playing in Japan strictly for financial reasons. I'm sure that's the biggest part of it. But, like, I don't, like, look down on them like, oh, you're just some greedy bugger that wants to go make big coin elsewhere. It's like, no, you know the value of yourself. You can't get what you feel like you're worth playing in South Africa, so you're going elsewhere.
Yeah.
When it comes to American sports, we don't really have that option here. Like the NBA is the top basketball league in the world. The NFL is really the only top football league in the world. Major League Baseball, this is the top league in the world. Ice hockey, this is the top league in the world. Like this is where you want to be for those four sports. And even like, we have Major League Soccer here, which isn't a great league, but Messi is doing just fine playing over here. Granted, it's the end of his career, but like, I feel like that's kind of like the dichotomy here. Like, we have all of these premier leagues for athletes, but like, if you're amateur or you don't play a big four sport, you're screwed in this country.
Yeah.
Because you're not good enough. Playing Major League Rugby is not going to get you. So, a prime example, Bowden Waka, he's a Kiwi. He was MVP of our league. He signed a contract in Japan with one of the teams there. He never even got playing time. Like, he never even got to dress. I think he dressed one game and then came back here and killed killed the league for the rest of the year. But it's like, with a sport like rugby, because we're both huge rugby fans, you don't really have, like, if you're great at rugby in America, yeah, you can go play overseas, but like, even our overseas-based USA Eagles players are not American. AJ McGinney is an Irishman. He's our starting fly half. You should know who Ruben DeHaas is. He plays for the Cheetahs. Like, he's a Safa boy. I mean, most of our best players that play overseas are not from America. They play overseas because that's where they're from. We had a guy a few years back, and you could find, if you look him up, Langy is his last name. He went and played in the Premiership for a bit, and he kind of caused waves. Like, Big Jim has brought him up on his show. He has like 605 tattooed across his throat.
Yeah.
Langy is from Palo Alto, California. He's of Tongan blood. That's his gang tattooed on his neck. He was so big in his gang that when he would be texting other players when he was in the Premiership, he wouldn't use the letters C and K next to each other because he's a Crip, and that means Crip killer. So he would spell everything like back would be B-A-K, not B-A-C-K. And he went over there, his very first game in the Premiership, I think he got a red card, came back after 3 games, got another yellow card, came back. Like, Langy was a gangster. He did really well overseas, but like, even I heard this story with like Joe Marler. They go to get on the bus, and usually your veterans sit in the very back of the bus. They get on the bus, and he's sitting back there with his headphones on the very last row. And they kind of look at each other like, is anybody going to say anything to this guy? And they were just like, no, nobody say a fucking word. Because he was just a scary looking guy with all these like gang tattoos all over his body. And he plays here now domestically again and has played for the USA Eagles. Absolutely great rugby player. I have met him. He is scary. He has a face tattoo now with the same thing, with his gang on his face. But like, that guy would have never made any money playing here. He had to go to the Premiership to make a decent paycheck. Do I look down on him for it? Hell no.
Yeah.
But it's like, we live in a country where we pay $350 for a collegiate football ticket for a player that's might get his rent and his tuition paid for. Like, there's something seriously wrong with that.
I think it's very flippin' sad, man, because at the end of the day, America's got the money, bro. this is the thing, right? Everybody knows when you speak to people across the world, they know that America's got the money, right? Excuse me. So I think it's pretty sad that they're not throwing enough towards these people that's putting their bodies on the line. It's actually ridiculous, to be honest. And I guess that's also why you're losing top talent. That's why you would continue to lose top talent, because to overseas clubs and whatnot, because because you're not paying them. But it's also the other sad part of it is that, you know, if you have a look at the history of South African rugby, right? I'm just bringing it up because it's just something I want to
Yeah.
quickly just put out there. So when we played against poor teams, we played poorly. Okay. When we played against great teams, we played greatly, right? So obviously that just pushes you to get yourself at a higher level, to play at a higher level because competition is higher and you work harder and you play harder and all those type of stuff, right? But now when your players are leaving to go play in overseas teams, right? The guys that's still left behind, those guys aren't playing against that top level players.
Yeah.
So they're not really getting that opportunity to raise their bar. Okay. So I think it's a deep rooted problem. At the end of the day, what happens is that, your local teams ain't really progressing as much as they could be by keeping their top talent local. If that makes sense.
I mean, so we kind of talk about that. You look at a team like the All Blacks, where in NZRU rules, you can't play outside of New Zealand and play for the All Blacks. That was kind of the rule for a while with a lot of teams. And then teams started realizing, okay, we're losing players. We've got to let these guys go overseas. And I was thankful when SA Rugby said, yes, you can do this, because I knew high end guys don't want to play here. There's not enough money playing for the Cats. There's not enough money playing for the Western Province. There's not enough money. So I don't have any, but it's like you look at a country like New Zealand that does have that rule, but you can make enough money playing in Super Rugby in New Zealand to support yourself.
Yeah.
So like at least they're paying their players enough to not have to leave.
Yeah. To want to keep the local.
Yeah, and I mean, so I do tip my hat to that, but that's also because New Zealand has money. They have money. They have a massive tourism industry. They have massive resources. I mean, there's more sheep than people in that country. I speak from personal experience. There's more sheep than people in New Zealand.
But are they breathing there?
Yeah. So funny story. So well, Aussies will call Kiwi sheep shaggers because they think they're all shagging the sheep, and then Kiwis will say, "Hey, how'd that sheep taste? how'd that lamb taste? We shagged it. That's why it tastes so good."
Yeah.
But anywho, you look at the countries, like I said, and it kind of does come back to the very first part of our video. It's like the countries that can and the countries that can't, and it's like, I don't necessarily think that like South Africa is a country that can, but they're not quite a country that can't either. Like it's just kind of like Sia's going to leave after the World Cup. Is he going to Racing 92 or Toulon? He's going to one. Yeah.
He's going to Racing, but as I understand, it's interchangeable. So as I understood, the Sharks and Racing 92, in terms of collaboration on a global scale,
so
they're doing like a thing there. So yeah, look, I think the South African rugby is really trying to tie up with European rugby teams to really build bridges, so that people are still available when required and vice versa. And so, when you have a look at your South African rugby, the problem is we breed too many rugby players. So that is the biggest problem, right? The first problem. So if you have a look, Scotland's got South Africans, right? If you look, Japan has got South Africans. If you look, like so many countries has got South African-born rugby players in their national teams, right? So we just breed too many rugby players, and we cannot employ them all. All right. And then when some of the greats go abroad, that's fine. We've got that relationships with those clubs, of course, that because the way we grow up as people, we've got so much of pride in ourselves, right? And everybody dreams of wearing that green and gold. Okay. I can promise you, Skuman from Scotland, if he had an opportunity to have been able to play for South Africa in terms of the Springboks, he would have dropped Scotland, all right, like
Oh,
a hot fucking potato.
immediately.
All right. So, and this is the thing. Everybody, when you grow up, your dream is to play for the Springboks. It's just what it is. You are ingrained that way. It's a culture. It's part of you. You cannot separate that from your DNA,
Yeah,
right? When I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a Bulls player. You know, sure, later on I became a Stormers supporter and stuff like that, but that's not the point, right? You from small, your parents are teaching you you're going to one day be a rugby player, you're going to one day play rugby, you're going to be a like, and this is your dream. And this is everything about all the players, is that it's their dream to one day play for the Springboks. That's why you get guys that negotiated into their contracts that they can come back if World Cup calls and beckons. You know, that guys can still probably get more money playing now in the Premiership or whatever games are getting played. I
yeah,
saw, for instance, Pollard's already practicing with his team. He's on the bench for the next game. And I mean, the World Cup is going. Okay. So those guys can probably still get paid more there than for the actual World Cup games. But yet there's such an abundance, and you can only take so many players, right? So unfortunately, some need to stay home, and those guys still need to play their own rugby. So, but anyways, the point that I'm trying to get to is that you know if they actually did that in the US as well, where they ingrained these people, with that sense of pride, those people will stay. But you have to make it lucrative enough for those people to want to stay. It makes financial sense for our guys to come back. It makes financial sense for them to play abroad. It makes financial sense either which way you look at it, whether or not that guy stays or goes. He can still support his family. You know, when you have a look at the American Major League Rugby, the guys they cannot support their families. All right. And a lot of these people, like if you have a look, okay, when you're mentioning the guys are in from the projects playing NFL, right? That's playing, or maybe even before NFL, they're playing college football, right? A lot of these people got kids, man. They
yeah,
got a
yeah.
girlfriend. They got people that they need to support. So, and they're trying to improve their lifestyle, man. And they can't do it if they're not getting paid. And I mean, if like you also can't be practicing 24/7, all right, for a sport that you have to do to be in college and still work a job to pay for your family. You know what I mean? It's impossible. So I can only imagine what the guys are going through. I'm actually very sad for them that it's like that.
You, you kind of bring that up, like players who are supporting their family, and it really does make you kind of wonder too behind the scenes a bit. I mean, like you look at somebody like our captain Sia Khaleesi, it's not just him and his kids that he's supporting. He's probably floating an entire family as well. He's probably floating his family. He's
Yeah,
probably these Pacific Islander guys. A lot of them, they're floating a guy that I mentioned as one of my greatest on my greatest 15 of all time, Rapeni Kaukow. That guy made millions of pounds playing rugby overseas. That guy was flat broke when he stopped playing. You want to know why? Because every single pound dollar he made went back to his village. And I
yeah,
and it is another reason why I do love this sport. And you do see those kind of stories in sports everywhere. I think you see it a bit more overseas, obviously, because in America, it's kind of this idea that you get the money and all your problems go away, or you just don't talk about them in public anymore. We had a kid that went to the same college who played for the Dallas Cowboys, a guy by the name of Des Bryant. Des Bryant grew up in a trailer home in southeast Texas called Lufkin. It's a small little dinky town. The only way this guy was doing anything with his life was with football. Dez's mother was in prison for crack cocaine possession and distribution his whole childhood. She gets out, he gets an NFL contract, he puts her up in a house in DeSoto, Texas, south of Dallas, and he's floating his entire family on the back of his salary with the NFL. He took not just himself out of poverty, but his entire family out of poverty. Now you can say, oh, what a great story that is. Well, then the problem happens is that Dez gets hurt. His contract ends with Dallas, and nobody wants to re-sign him because they know that he's never been the same since his injury. And ends up broke. He ends up flat broke. Now he's got revenue coming in again, but that guy, he had 50 people depending on his salary. And when it went away, what happened to those people? I'm pretty sure a lot of them ended up right back in poverty. You get another gentleman who went to my university who was one of the top draft picks, a guy named Justin Blackman. He was a wide receiver. He's from Ardmore, Oklahoma, which is just 30 minutes north of me in Oklahoma. Same thing. He gets into the league. He's got a drug problem and an alcohol problem. So he's in and out of the league in less than 2 years. And I'm pretty sure he works at the same company my future father-in-law does. I think he works at a Michelin plant. This was a guy that was a top pick in the National Football League. And now he works at a tire plant because he didn't finish college. He went to the league early. He didn't get his college degree. And a lot of these guys do that. A lot of these guys that come from abject poverty, they don't finish school. As soon as they're able to get an NFL contract, they're gone because they've got 50 people to feed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sad part about sports, I think all over the world, is that there are families that are so dependent on one person making it or breaking it. And you feel for those guys sometimes, because for a fact that if Sia wasn't playing rugby, he'd probably just be another poor South African.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys. Yeah. He doesn't have a family. We've watched the clip of Rassie crying. The first time I watched it, it made me cry. Makazole Mapipi comes from nothing. If it wasn't for rugby, he would be nothing.
Yeah. And look, I mean, a lot of this, the sport really takes a person out of it, right? So, number one, it gives you discipline, right? It gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a goal. It gives you drive. It gives you passion. It gives you all these things. And, without that, where would you be, right? Where would you be without passion and drive and, all these things and discipline? Where would you be, right? When you grow up in a little village, look, when we say village, we mean 15 houses, right? That's probably made of it's probably a rondavel with some stuff on it, right? So, and it's open land, and there's maybe a few cows running around, and where would you be? You'd be there in the field minding your flipping cows, okay? And I'm not talking about a lot of cows. I'm talking about 10 cows, all right? So, and that's to support your family. You can't even really make money of that. So, exactly what you say, where would these guys be? So really, sport gives them a purpose in life. And, for me, it gives me purpose from a supporter point of view. But for them, it changes their lives. It improves their lives 100-fold.
For you and me, it's all about entertainment, but that's really at the end of the day. And I think we started out this video talking about how much it costs, but really at the end of the day, I think the cost is a lot bigger than we want to say, because there are so many people that depend on these guys that we watch for entertainment. And at the end of the day, is there really a dollar amount that you could put on that? Because there are people that this is all they have to feed themselves. And Another kind of quote that I heard, it was an interview where the guy was talking. It was a guy for a underwear company that was giving Evan Etzebeth a ride in his Subaru, and I guess the joke was that Evan's knees were up on the dash because he's so tall. And the guy asked him, "Hey, Evan, what do you like outside of rugby?" And Evan took like a second and just kind of cleared his throat real quick and was like, "Yeah, man, I just really like rugby." That's really all Evan likes. That's all he's about. And luckily for Evan, he's good enough to pay the bills with what he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But I know Evan, and I know that the kid playing at University of North Texas here on a football, or the guy playing baseball at the college, or the girl playing university soccer here, I'm pretty sure they all have. There's probably a little bit of that in every one of them. If you ask them, "Hey, what are you really passionate about?" and at the end of the day, they're going to tell you their sport that they're playing is what they're passionate about. And is there really a dollar amount you could put on that? And I really don't think there is. I don't think there
Yeah.
is.
Look, at the end of
Um,
the day, these guys, they put their everything in there. Their whole heart and soul, and they spend hours upon hours upon hours every day trying to improve, trying to become the best version of what. And this is the secret, right? The best version of what all the flippin' pundits out there believe they should be. Okay, because everybody's got a flippin' opinion, right? I mean, if you have a look at at Willie Leroux, for instance, pre 2019 World Cup, right? I actually sent him a message on what's that app called, Instagram, right? I sent him a message on Instagram, and I I I I think he's way too busy to respond at the moment, preparing for that game tomorrow. But the simple fact is, pre 2019, this guy was dropping balls and stuff like that, but he had no feeling in his damn arm. He injured his flipping shoulder,
yeah,
So, and I didn't know that at the time, right? And I was one of those people, and that we like, yes, can we just like, can we put some glue on this guy's hands or something, And after I watched that Chasing the Sun, right? Yes, I felt so bad that I was part of that, right? That I've part of that train of people, and like, because everybody's got an opinion, right? Because we all feel like we know best. All right. We're not there. We're not there every day seeing what these guys go through. And I feel that, you know, since I've become sort of, uh, I don't know if you would call it a content creator or what, but since I started doing this, I started really looking at things in a different way, right? I really started finding a new appreciation um, for the other side of things as well, not just for what other people want to see in the game, but also from the other side of, like, these are still people, right? We tend to forget that. They can still have bad days, they can still get injured, right? And we forget these things sometimes as fans. We quick to cast a stone. And I feel I just wanted to bring up that, it's something that has opened my eyes, and I hope, for those that's listening, that it might open their eyes as well and realize that these guys are really putting their all into things, and we need to really appreciate it more sometimes, when a guy has a bad day or whatever, because we're quick to throw somebody away. And those guys that's got injured in the NFL, one injury, and now his thing is up, and he gets thrown away, and now his family's got nothing. And you start to question: are we doing them the service the same way as they are doing us the service? You know, are we being the true fans as they are being the true players?
and that does kind of end all of this kind of on a real, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're 100% correct there. Um, and I think, yeah, we as fans, we sometimes it's not even that we forget, we don't even think about that. And that's
Yeah,
pretty much what we really probably need to start doing, is that, is it so much more than just being a fan? Like, there's a fan and there's a supporter, and it's like, I
yeah,
feel like with what we do, we kind of walk the fine line between both. We're fans, but we're also supporters through thick and thin
yeah.
of whatever, whether it's Oklahoma State, Cowboys, college football, or Emirates Lions, or the Springboks. Like, we walk that fine line between being fans and supporters, where
Mm,
we want a little bit more in depth than what the typical fan wants. And sometimes when we end up finding out that there's so much more that we don't see as just fans, like we see so much more of what's going on outside of the 80 minutes on the pitch every game, or the four quarters, or the three periods, or the two halves. Like, we don't. And I think that is something that, like, we probably all need to really step back and kind of take a look at sometimes, that, like, what more is there that we're just not. It's cool to be entertained, but we also kind of need
yeah.
to, like, realize exactly what's going on behind all of that.
Yeah, and
But
I wasn't trying to say that because and cast a stone at anybody, because I'm just as guilty as the next guy, right? I mean, if you go and have a look at one of my first videos on my channel, I was doing a reaction to South African Springboks against Argentina in Joburg, and it was supposed to be a reaction, but it was like an 18-minute rant about the coaching staff,
yeah,
right? Because I was like questioning whether or not they're really using some thought pattern in what they do, and I'm guilty of that fact. So I can own up and say, listen, I was also wrong. You know,
we all
I
are.
also did
We
these
all
things.
are.
So, but I just sometimes I just find myself thinking, yeah, if I can just always be a supporter, right? These guys, this is what they need, right? This is what drives them, right? They want to bring hope to the hopeless, right? And not just to people in South Africa, man. It's all over the world. They want to bring hope to everybody because, as you mentioned today, those three Springboks, right? Siya Kolisi, Evan Etzebeth, and Colby, they went into the locker rooms with Chile playing today,
Yeah.
right? I'm pretty sure all those Chile players are probably massive fans of those three guys, right? So they don't just bring hope to the average South African. I think they bring hope to a lot of people out there. People can identify with these guys, right? They're not just then we don't own them as South Africans, right?
Yeah.
They play for us, yes, but we don't own them, all right? They can bring hope globally. They can bring hope everywhere. There might be a little village in Chile where a kid grows up and he sees this guy playing and he'd be like, listen, I want to be like this guy one day, right? We don't own that, you know. They bring hope to the world. And this is the thing, and we need to I just want to always remember that, we're very humble. We need to stay humble, rather, in that, so that, I find that a lot of us, like when I watch a lot of the reactions, like some of the guys are just going mental. Like, sure, I'm proud of my team when they do well, but I don't want to break other people's mentors down. I don't want to look down on Romania that plays against us tomorrow, right? I know we're going to beat the crap out of them. I know
Oh, of
it
course.
because,
Yeah.
I mean,
No
we're just that
question.
good, right? But I don't want to break those people down because they are somebody else's idol in the country that they come from, right? So they deserve to be on that stage. And I get annoyed when I hear people like, uh, uh, you know, uh, really treat these guys like they're less than what they're supposed to be, right? Like they're condescending and like playing that these guys are being so like should be proud of being there type thing, right? those guys played their asses off. They practiced their asses off. They beat other countries to qualify. They deserve to be there.
Oh,
Sure, they're not. They're
100%.
not. They're not tier one yet, right? But they're a growing nation in a growing sport that love the sport, right? And
No,
that's the thing. I get goosebumps when I think about these things, bro.
well, with that, man, I think we covered a lot today. I mean, if you'd agree, we kind of went, and
Yeah,
I think that's going to be kind of the benefit of what we do. We start off on one thing, we hopscotch around, and then we end up back at where we started. And I promise, as we get more of these going, guys, and I'm sure he'll agree, Pierre will agree,
yeah,
I'll have a bit more structure. But I think right now, I feel like letting people know a little bit behind the scenes of it too. I call Pierre pretty much every day on my lunch break. My missus calls me, I eat, and I call him. Uh, we
yeah,
we call each other on WhatsApp, and it's like really, it's more of like a hey man, what's going on in your neck of the woods every day? Like hey, yeah, we'll do the rugby gossip, but then we'll talk about hey, what did your wife bring home for dinner? What did you do for lunch? That kind of thing. Like, and I think I want people to understand that we're across oceans from each other, but we both I mean, we both wipe our asses after we shit. Like we both want a good meal.
yeah.
He might have a beer or a glass of booze. I don't drink, obviously, but like I think that's really what I want people to really get out of this is that his
Mm.
accent completely opposite of mine, but the world still rotates the exact same way, regardless of whether the guy speaks English, Spanish, Afrikaans, German, French, whatever. This world, we like to think of it as like this really big place, but really it's kind of a small place. And I think the internet for fixing a lot of that, because it used to be a lot bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
But that's why I enjoy these conversations. And that's why we do this podcast, because every time we talk, it's always something like, even if we're talking about how much we hate fast food or how much we, maybe dislike this or that, or, we are united on a few things. One is Springbok rugby, two is sports, and three is our hatred of the band Nickelback. We are 100% united in our
Fuck those
hatred
guys.
of the band Nickelback. Like that is 100%. We are on the same page, same words, same book, and we can both without any hesitation say that Nickelback sucks.
We agree, bro.
So we will end
Look,
it on that
we're
nice little
metalheads,
joke
guys.
there.
So
But it's not a joke. Nickelback does suck.
yeah. But
All
so
right,
funny
man. You
to
got
laugh
anything
at
else to
it.
say, Pierre?
No, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's tuning in to our podcast. Of course, it's always fun to have a chat with you, Keith. Of course, if people agree or don't agree, they can feel free to comment as much as they want. We welcome everything, and I hope we maybe touch some of you guys. In a way where the message gets through to you guys, because I think personally that we're quite deep people. So I think when we have some of these conversations, we mean it with the best of intentions. We're not just sure Nickelback sucks, right? But I mean everything else that we discuss is quite things that I think is quite valuable and important. And, it certainly is to me, and I know it is to you. So I'm pretty sure there's other people out there that shares the same view or maybe needs to hear this and change the way they view the world, right? So, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's really tuning into us, and thank you, Keith, for sticking with me through all of this. This podcast idea that I had, and it's just like it's fun to have a bit of a chat to a guy across the pond, and it's something that we will learn from and something that we will continue to grow from. And of course, as Keith mentioned, we will start finding our rhythm in terms of more structured approaches. But it's always nice to the first maybe 1 or 2 episodes just to really get to know the person, who you're listening to, who you're going to be spending your time with. Because remember, we're very fortunate that these guys are taking the time out of their day to listen to us, right? So just ramble on. So thank you guys, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
All right then.